Good morning, y'all. Bud Elliott here of the Nolecast coming to you from California before I head back out to the field at Elite 11. I just wanted to go over a couple things here, mostly recruiting chat today, but also a couple team things. First off, I'm not a huge college baseball guy, and I'm not going to pretend that I watch a lot of regular season college baseball. I'm not here to yuck anybody's yum if that is their thing, but man. I do enjoy the College World Series, and hats off to Link Jarrett for the turnaround that he pulled off with his team. I don't know how the ACC Coach of the Year um, or any of these Coach of the Year awards are voted on, but you can go from how bad this team was last year to how good this team is this year. Um, that's ridiculous. Well done there. I mean that's they got screwed on that check swing call. I think we all sort of understood. I know we don't talk much college baseball on the show, but we understood that in all likelihood you needed to come from the winners bracket with the way that this team's pitching staff was set up. And unfortunately, when the Tennessee thing happened, college baseball umpires kind of suck. That sets you up on a path that you had to dip a little more, I think, into the pitching depth than you wanted to dip into. But I mean, hell of a run, and you just got to be so comfortable with the footing that FSU baseball is on with Link Jarrett. So extremely happy to see that. Uh, Something else that feels like a pretty comfortable footing is the football team coached by Mike Norvell. I saw Bruce Feldman put out for the Athletic. I've known Bruce for a long time. Good dude. And I think somebody who's not afraid to put his own opinion out there as opposed to just parroting the opinion of others. And Feldman, I was pretty impressed by the job that he did with his projected college football playoff. Um, and Florida State came in as the 3 seed, which means they would receive a bye. That means they're the champion of the ACC, and then they would play the winner of the 6-11 matchup, which I believe was Oregon and someone. If that's the draw you got, maybe you play that game. Who knows at the Orange Bowl, so it becomes kind of a pseudo home game for you. I think Nole fans would be extremely happy with winning the conference and getting to play a team uh, that is not named Georgia or Ohio State in the first round. Just from judging off the preseason betting lines that have been released, you look at this. Ohio State's like a 1-point favorite in Oregon. Sorry about that. So, I mean, if you look at the lines right now on Circa and some of the initial Game of the Year lines that have been released, Ohio State is like a 1-point favorite at Oregon. Ohio State's probably the second best rated team in the country. Um, I'm rambling here, but the point is, that's a game that FSU would not be favored to win, but they would certainly not be a sizable underdog to Oregon if, in fact, they are the number 3 seed in the country and had won the conference. Now, number 3 seed in the country does not mean that you are actually the third best team in the country. Of course, with the new 12-team college football playoff, we have buys given to the top 4 conference champions. So it's entirely foreseeable that, I mean, heck, the Big 12 champion could be perhaps as bad as like maybe the 20th best team in the country and still receive a number 4 seed. It's pretty foreseeable that the ACC team, the ACC champion, maybe is more like a somewhere between, I don't know, 8th to like 16th best team in the country. Although I think probably a little bit better than that low end. But again, that is sort of one of the benefits of playing in the ACC is that you will get a bye into the second round if you win the ACC. And I do think there's a good chance that you get 2 teams from the ACC. So anyway, just checking in on that. I thought that was fairly interesting. Want to talk some recruiting. So Florida State certainly has some positive headwinds here and also some negative stuff. Uh, I think overall more positive relative to the overall framework with which they approach recruiting, um, and especially with overall talent acquisition. I think this staff now has a pretty damn good track record of player development, although on the negative side, some rivals would say, yeah, it's more developing of transfers, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, again, like if you have a guy like Jordan Travis spend 4 or 5 years in your system, I think you can probably claim that one, even though he initially started at Louisville and was mismanaged at Louisville. Also, coaching continuity, having the same guys in place, that matters quite a bit. And I do think that is something that is probably benefiting FSU, even if you could also argue that some coaching continuity here is potentially a negative. Only in terms of the recruiting trail, I would say. I mean, certainly some of the guys on FSU staff are not ace recruiters, and we have spoken before about the need to establish balance between the salesmanship needed in recruiting and also the ability to actually coach the players once they get on campus. The other thing that I think is in some ways hurting is the continued association with the ACC and with the playoff snub. If I'm an FSU opponent, and I know this is happening, they are definitely saying like, "Hey, look what happened. ACC is not big time, right? You'll get more exposure in the SEC." Blah 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 blah, and to some extent the Big Ten, although you've not been butting heads with that many Big Ten teams when it comes to recruiting. The other negative thing that they face is the continued association, as I said, with the portal, which is why it's an important year for them to showcase some of the homegrown, and I use homegrown kind of loosely because again, you could also homegrown guys or home grow guys out of the portal. I think if you have them for multiple years, obviously not a Keon Coleman, but there are certain dudes on this roster who have been in FSU system for much longer than they have been in any other college system, even if that is not where they put pen to paper on signing day, as I said earlier with Jordan Travis. I also think it's really important to kind of keep some perspective here. So FSU's won 10 games, and then they won 13 games, and their over under now is like 9.5. So with a bowl, very good chance that this team can get to 10 wins again. And if that estimation from Vegas is correct of 9.5, that means you will be in the playoff conversation. I think fairly deep into the year, especially with how some of the games fall. But you see some of these other teams, and there is no prize for winning the recruiting national championship in May or even June. Now, most commits do stick, some will flip. That's for any team out there. But if you look at this, there are some interesting situations to monitor, I think, that are specifically related to how FSU's recruiting is going. Um, you saw USC, pull an elite level player from Jacksonville and two from the state of Georgia. This was, I believe, March, like almost the last week in March. And on cover three, I said, they had me react to it because I do more of the recruiting for the show. And I was like, well, honestly, guys, I just, it's a hard we'll see for me. We will see if these type of players actually stick. And there are certainly some situations this year where what happens on the field is probably going to matter, quite a bit. USC just had the two of those three kids decommit. Michigan is another one that I'd be watching, particularly when it comes to offense. So this kind of gets into the quarterback conversation that I will tie into here. And I'll bring this back up again in a second. But like North Carolina and South Carolina are also teams against which Florida State finds itself recruiting somewhat this year, particularly at the receiver position and then also some of the edge rusher stuff there. Well, I mean, look, Mac Brown is pretty old for coaching standards, and North Carolina is expected to have a step back year. Is that staff going to be there? I don't know. That's certainly a situation that if I'm Florida State, I am monitoring. And even if I am not the lead dog in a recruitment right now against North Carolina or against South Carolina, I would still keep the pressure on those kids. South Carolina, over under in Vegas is not expected to make a bowl. That's not really something that is maybe considered by recruits right now, but losses have consequences, as we have seen. And that is something that I think FSU will continue to monitor. I largely think that they are doing a good job this year of recruiting bodies at premium positions that you otherwise can't get in the portal, or that are rarely available in the portal, you know? So, like, not slot receiver, that type of stuff. Large receivers. This year we saw very few big bodied receivers in the portal. If there had been one, maybe Florida State goes and wants to get one, right? Like, but Miami wanted one, they didn't get it. Florida wanted one, they didn't get it. Georgia got one. Did Texas get one? Not really. So I think they're doing a good job of that, which leads me into the most premium of all positions, and that is quarterback. So I've seen a lot of Tramel Jones over the last couple of months. I've seen him at camps. I've seen him at Elite 11, obviously, where he's done quite well out here, as expected, I think. And I've also seen him play a lot of 7-on-7. And Tramel Jones is committed to FSU. He continues to also take visits to Florida. Uh, I know Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports spoke with him. I believe Zach Blostein at Knowles 247, which does a great job, has also spoken with him. And this reminds me, prospects have to make the right choice for them, and schools have to make the right choice for the school. And I want to be delicate in the way I say this, because it never comes down to just one factor. But different schools are going to value different prospects differently, both in terms of how good they think a prospect is, but also how the prospect fits into the room, into the sort of window to win cycle, and into the recruiting cycle overall. If Florida State goes out and pops Brady from California, the 2026 quarterback, then they will have really hit on quarterback, they feel, in 3 of the last 4 years. And Tramel is a good prospect. Let's be clear about this. I do not think he is as good of a prospect in terms of prospect upside as Luke Kromenhoek, and probably not as good as Brock Glenn. But I do think he is, in some ways, better as a prospect than AJ Duffy. Now, here's the thing. People want to use hindsight bias on this and say, "Hey, AJ Duffy ended up, really sucking in Tallahassee." Yeah, he did. That is factual. But you can't compare what happened with the kid in college to a kid who's not in college yet. You only have to look at them as prospects. Tramel is really, really good in camp settings. He's got a clean a clean delivery. It's not too long. He does throw with his body, but not to his detriment. I think the ball comes out with very nice RPMs, and there's a lot to like there. Now, for his size, he's not particularly a plus athlete, and that is something that matters quite a bit. There are not many guys who are his size who make it big time and become absolute superstars, who are also not a value add in the run game, both in terms of hurting the defense with their legs and also in terms of the ability to avoid sacks, evade pressure, and find receivers open after having done so. So, yeah, I think it is fair to say that he is probably not as good of a prospect as Brock Glenn. I definitely do not think that his upside is quite what Luke Kromenhoek's is. And so it just comes down to, where does it make sense for him to go? I don't really know what will happen there. He is due in for an official visit, and we'll see. I assume that trip will happen. I have received no indications that it won't, and I'm sure that he will give the staff some indication whether he is in or out. Now, you would like for your quarterback to be actively recruiting for you, I think. It just kind of makes sense, but in this case, his teammate Jamie French is not going to Florida State, so it's not like, if you do not land Tramel Jones, that you have foreclosed the opportunity to land Jamie French. Jamie French was really not considering FSU, at least not seriously. Uh, if I had to guess, I think he'll end up at Texas. Uh, French, that is, not Jones. And Vernell Brown, his friend who plays on his South Florida Express team, is sort of a Florida and Florida State battle as well. I have always thought that he would probably end up making his commitment to UF, although nobody has officially told me that. That's just kind of the vibe I get. I do hear some things living in Orlando. Uh, so here's the thing: Florida State's win total in Vegas right now is 9.5. Florida's is 4.5. If that happens, if Florida goes out and goes 4-8 or 5-7 and misses a bowl, and Florida State meets its Vegas expectation and goes 10-2 or 9-3. And look, I think we can kind of think a bowl win is somewhat likely due to the ACC pairings. But regardless, bowls are not played before signing day. So if you have a 5-7 team in the Gators and you have a 9-3 or 10-2 team, potentially a playoff team in Florida State, does any of this stuff matter? Right? Like at a certain point, I think Florida State will pitch like, do you want to win or not? Does staff continuity matter and staff stability? Does it matter or not? Now, the portal exists, obviously. Hell, FSU damn sure knows the portal exists. But sometimes this situation works out and sometimes it does not. I think if I can go back to the Brock Glenn recruitment, look, man, Florida State just wanted Brock Glenn more than Ohio State did. They valued Brock Glenn more than Ohio State did. Now, Ohio State wanted Brock Glenn. They wanted to keep Brock Glenn in that class. They thought he had talent, but they did not value him as much as FSU did, right? Sometimes that stuff matters. I think it is possible that Florida, maybe they have a different valuation on the prospect than FSU does. And yet I know for a fact that FSU likes Jones, wants Jones to be in the class, etc. I also know that Florida State feels good about where their quarterback room sits, both currently and also looking to the future. Let's talk Michigan for a second, because I'm going to circle back to this. So Luke Nickel, obviously, it was reported that Florida State is reaching out to him as well. He's a Georgia kid who's committed to Miami. He's an Elite 11 quarterback as well, a talented guy. One guy who's not here, who does have some nice developmental upside and some big-time tools, is Carter Smith. Carter Smith is currently committed to Michigan. Makes a lot of sense. That's right. They just won the national title. They just had a quarterback go, top 10, top 5, whatever J.J. McCarthy went. And they're expected to win quite a few games this year as well, but mostly on the backs of a defense that returns almost everybody of consequence. There has not been a lot of positive reporting out of Michigan as to how the offense will look. And look, guys, clearly FSU's offense, I think, will be good under Mike Norvell, but it had some really bad days in spring too. Like we don't have to hide that, right? There will be some challenges and some new elements about this offense under DJU, which will come with some frustrations. But Carter Smith's a kid from down there in Fort Myers, Bishop Verot. Like, if I'm the Noles, that's a guy that I'm kind of keeping warm. I'm keeping in communication with, because that's an entirely new Michigan staff, with the exception of Sharon Moore. Almost every coach left to go coach the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. What if Michigan's offense is like extremely run heavy, not quarterback friendly, and doesn't look very good? What if it looks very different from what they had with Jim Harbaugh? We don't know. So that's a situation that could change. It could also change with 2026 quarterback Brady Hart, who committed to Michigan. So what I'm saying here is there are certain teams against which you are either directly recruiting or sort of parallel recruiting, which could have things go in a direction that is bad for them, but favorable for the Noles. And if you know what you're looking at, that could play out. So I know a lot of folks are like, where is the huge bump from going 13-0? I think they are seeing a bump in terms of the quality of prospect with whom they're involved. Uh, but this staff also lacks in terms of a critical mass of good salespeople in terms of coaches. I just don't think that's what their identity is. And you could say, hey, you got to change that. And I don't disagree in some cases, but also um, the staff wins a whole lot of games and they win in fairly smart ways. And if you want to tell me that they're playing Moneyball in some cases with this stuff, then I think you are probably correct. So they like Tramel Jones. I think they want Tramel Jones to stay in the class. I also don't think that they are losing sleep if Tramel Jones were to flip, if that makes sense. He is not a prospect that is generational or who has like truly special physical abilities. Although I do think he's a good prospect and could have a very nice college career. So we'll have to see on that. A lot of unknowns there, but yet I would not panic. And you guys know that I'm not afraid to just kind of, I hate this, like when people are like, oh, I'm not afraid to tell it how it is, but because how it is quite subjective. In my opinion, I would not panic over quarterback recruiting for the Noles at all. Something I do know about though is a legendary team. Chad does such a great job. 844 FSU loan, 844 FSU loan is the number to call if you need an excellent home loan. I've had two, and over 500 Nolecast listeners have as well. I trust them. 844 FSU loan is the number to call to get hooked up with the legendary team for your mortgage, especially if you are a veteran. They can or first responder. They can definitely help you out with that as well. All right, running back. I feel largely okay about here. I'm just going to kind of run down some positions. I mean, Byron Lewis or Chroma, I think are. I mean, if you can get one of them, that's excellent. Um, Keeps the running back train rolling. I don't know that this is an amazing year for running backs overall, and so just finding one who fits your system and who is, I wouldn't over allocate resources for a non-premium position who doesn't have a real special talent. Receiver is another area to look for here, and I would say my concern level here at receiver is let's call it non-zero, right? So I'm not panicking at receiver, but I do think FSU should probably have a little more traction at the position than they currently do. But yet we'll see, right? Um, Khalid Lockett out of Texas, I think they still have somewhat of a shot for them, although I would not call FSU the leader. Josh Moore, a big-bodied South Florida kid who I know FSU likes quite a bit. That's the type of player I would say. I don't know if he's going to hit. I don't know if he's going to be good. But if he does hit his projection, that is the type of body who is rarely available, at least through 4 years of the portal, in the portal, right? There are a lot of slots out there. There are a lot of guys who are good with the ball in their hands. Most teams do not lose their stud, big-bodied receivers. Those guys who can, in Florida State's offense, for instance, can be that 9. They lock them up. Keon Coleman was largely an exception last year. This year on the market, there was kind of nobody in the entire country who really fit that bill. So, Josh Moore, a guy you're battling Florida, Miami, Georgia, but I think that's one that FSU actually has a decent chance to win out on. Vernell Brown, a really dynamic player. I'm not going to call him a slot, but in terms of stylistically, he's sort of Antonio Brownish, only on the field. An awesome kid off the field, at least in all of my interactions with him. I really enjoy talking to Vernell. Um, again, my guess is the Gators on that one, and I will refer you back to the conversation. Right now, I know he's a legacy. Um, if Florida overachieves this year, then I think all of the work that staff has been doing in terms of building relationships and selling will really pay off. But if Vegas is right and they go, win 4 or 5, maybe 6 games, because that schedule is really tough and the team is not particularly great, then it's probably all for naught, right? Like Dalen McCutcheon is a guy I think we need to continue to monitor. Like Willie Clark's another dude who I think you need to keep watching and seeing some of the situations of the other schools recruiting him. I don't ever worry about tight end really. I mean, it's a position where, um, if you look at it's almost entirely a crapshoot. There's very, very little predictive value in star ratings on tight ends, actually. And in fact, I think compared to all other positions, it's very difficult. One spot they are doing pretty well in, though, and they'll need to close, but they have a lot of interest, is offensive line. And that's huge. I expect them to have a quality offensive line this year, assuming health. You have a lot more bodies upon which you can depend, I believe, than you have had in prior years. So certainly something to check out there. And you have that sort of congruity of coaching staff, which, by the way, I talked to Matt the other day. It looks like we'll probably have a new client to report there as well. So happy that Matt continues his congruity sponsorship of the show and support of the show. And if you need any kind of business solutions, congruity is the place to hit up for sure. They just payroll, HR, whatever you need, congruity can help you up. Got to keep Solomon Thomas in the class, obviously. I mean, can you pull Josh Petty? Right? Can you pull Peyton Joseph? Is Lamont Rogers a realistic possibility? I will tell you what. I like this. What's the kid's name? Sonone put up a report on the other day from one of the big man camps, and I watched him, and then I had another college coach text me and like, dude, wow, good find by FSU. I was like, yeah, this kid can really play. Daniel Pierre-Louis, he's at Seminole Ridge in Loxahatchee. So just it's kind of like in South Florida, I guess, if I was going to describe where Loxahatchee is. I don't think he's a tackle, but damn, like gets off the ball nice, good feet. I talked to another school that he had visited, a smaller school that I really trust their scouting on, and they just said, dude, like great kid, and I think he's big time. So nice scouting there by Derek Ray and Alex Atkins and probably Gabe as well, finding him and getting him up for a camp. So I like where FSU sits in terms of like they're on the lead lap in terms of offensive line recruiting, to steal a NASCAR phrase. Now, will they close? I don't know. Got to close, but I do think that is something fairly important to watch there, because they have a real opportunity to close it out and to do well and to set this team up for a nice foundation going forward with the offensive line. And that's in addition to some of the pieces that they have grabbed in recent years that I think they feel extremely good about. I mean, obviously the feedback, I think they're pretty pleased with where they sit right now in the offensive line for future years. And I think they've hit on some of these recent signings. So that's quite encouraging, because sometimes offensive line can be a bit of a crapshoot. So you got to know what you're looking at, and you need to stay healthy and have those guys develop. Obviously, Lucas Simmons, missing last year with the medical stuff, but now he's back. That's very encouraging. So anyway, that's kind of the offensive look. So no, I'm not panicking that Florida State is dead last right now in recruiting in the ACC, because I mean, signing day is not in June, and I don't really particularly worry about that. The staff doesn't feel worried either from what I pick up. So defensively, how do I say this? Well, first of all, I should encourage you to hit up Charlie Park, awesome rooftop restaurant, and also Madison Social. I know we got some great feedback from Matt Thompson the other day, so I can find this. He texted Graham and myself. What we got here? From his end of the day report, shout out to KK for taking very good care of a group that came in today. Gentleman's first time back in Tallahassee since 2004, and he said he and his family made Madison Social a destination on a road trip after hearing about us for years on Nolecast. And Madso hooked him up and made sure they had an awesome time. So shout out to Matt and the folks at Madso, of course, like you knew they would do. It's a great experience, and I love going in there. And also, like, it. First of all, the food's really good, the beer's cold, and the AC works, and it's right next to camp. So when I'm at FSU camp, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go anywhere else for lunch. Now, you are going to have to deal, the debt will come due for recruiting defensive line as poorly as FSU has from the high school levels in recent years. But, and like, I'm not going to name all the misses here. I don't really have time to do that. And like, why be overly negative? There is some chance that you're able to mitigate the impact of those misses if you do really well. Like, I think keeping Javion Hilson in the class is fairly important. I mean, is he a generational prospect? I don't know about that, but the guy is really good at what he does. And what he does is being bendy and explosive off the edge and getting after the quarterback. Can you get Myron Charles in the fold at defensive tackle? Now, you might not think Myron Charles is an amazing player, but beggars can't be choosers. And this year on the defensive line in the state of Florida, it is not a great crop. You are seeing schools dip down a little more into the talent pool than they normally would. And I've had this feedback from a lot of different coaches I talk to, not just at Florida State. It's like, okay, this is what we have in the state this year. This is what we need to go after. But I do think Myron Charles is a guy who, as he continues to transform his body, has a chance to play at Florida State and potentially play at a high level at Florida State. I don't really buy FSU's chances of getting Justice Terry, who decommitted from USC. I think he's probably going to go to Georgia. But this is another spot on the defensive line to keep an eye on the Gators because Florida has done a nice job recruiting defensive line so far. Obviously, you know about Wiggins, but they're also in on some other guys, and the Gator season will have some impact on FSU's recruiting here for sure. Jeremiah McLeod, who again, like, is McLeod an FSU quality prospect in every single year? I don't know that. I think he's a guy though who could help you. That's the Gadsden County kid who's currently committed to FSU or to Florida. He was prior committed to Mississippi State. But in this year, I think he's a guy who is worth looking at, and who knows, prospects do play above their rankings at times. Linebacker, I actually feel decently about. Check back next week to see if that changes. And I will also say, like, I feel great about FSU at defensive back. I think they're about to have a major draft. Um, Pat Surtain has a nice reputation, I believe, with kids in terms of development, as well as Adam Fuller. And there's just so many targets. I'm interested to see how this plays out. But like, I got a chance to see Greg Thomas at OT7, and I thought he played exceptionally well. That's a top 200 player for us at 24/7 Sports at safety. And honestly, I mean, the guy could even play corner for you if you needed him to. So I am curious to see how all this plays out. But I I know some of y'all think we're negative. I am definitely not panicking any more than I normally would about FSU's high school recruiting right now. It's they only have 4 commits. If they really wanted to beef that up and just take more commits, but maybe quantity over quality, I guess they could. But like, you want to put money on some of these teams. Like, you think they're going to finish behind Syracuse, who's currently number 2 in the ACC, that has 1 4-star commit and 21 3-stars? Georgia Tech, Duke, Stanford, Wake, Boston College, SMU. I mean, heck, Miami. Like, that's the absolute best thing that staff does by far. High school recruiting, not development, not portal, not evaluation, not that kind of stuff. Certainly not game day coaching. They recruit their butts off in high school, and that's how Mario has built that staff. And that's a viable strategy, by the way, although it doesn't always look super clean. Miami is 10th in the ACC right now. 10th. Like, that's kind of an indication of where we are in this cycle. So, people can say, hey, look at all this. And, yeah, Ohio State's really doing a nice job with their class. Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson is certainly not slowing down in recruiting, but I mean, you better kill it if you're not going to take anybody in the portal. there are not that many teams in the top 10 right now who are like, oh, they have no shot to stay there. And with the exception of Clemson, they're all teams that are, I believe, power teams. Well, I guess Notre Dame as well. But then, like, the second level of teams are teams that are not going to last. Like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is Rutgers, Wisconsin, TCU, Arizona State, Syracuse. 18 is Georgia Tech, 20 Duke, 21 Minnesota, 22 Stanford, 23 Oklahoma State, 26 West Virginia. I mean, 29 Wake. I don't really give a damn about team recruiting rankings in June because the number of players you take, it messes with the algorithm in a way that come signing day does not, because the numbers are more similar for everyone come signing day. So yeah, that's a quick update for you on recruiting. I think if you're a Nole fan, you should feel overall good. I don't know that like they certainly not taking a step back in my opinion. They correctly forecasted that is at some position certainly a bit of a down year in the state of Florida. They're trying to look out of state for some help at some of those spots, and I do think the staff continuity, I think it's probably paying off for you in some ways because there's a stability factor to this program that other programs against which whom you're recruiting probably can't sell, or if they can sell it, the clock is potentially ticking on how long that sales pitch will be viable. Anyway, I expect Trammell to probably kill it today at the 7-on-7. He's extremely good camp and 7-on quarterback, and so this is definitely his setting. He's looked nice out here, and I'm going to go watch him and all of the other quarterbacks out here. And yeah, those are my thoughts on recruiting as of now. And like I said, joint episode coming back next week. I'll see y'all.